Welcome to the Silicon Road Chess channel. This channel will show you how to use chess engines like Leela and Stockfish as powerful training partners in the opening, middle game and endgame, and help you improve your chess in exciting and modern ways. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler. I'm a 2-time British champion. I've been ranked in the world's top 50 for many years, and I'm also a prolific author. My most recent book was Game Changer, written together with Natasha Regan, which brought the amazing chess games of DeepMind's AlphaZero to the world. My next book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which will come out in the last part of 2021, is just like this channel, all about learning from and training with engines. This video is in our Great Engine Middlegames series, and features a recent game between Stockfish and Leela, played in the TCEC Cup 9 final, played just a couple of days ago. The middle game features a number of very important themes: attacking rhythm, engine defense and whole board play, all of which are dealt with comprehensively in my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. And well, I think that after watching this video you're going to improve your skills in those 3 very important areas. So let's have a look. This position was reached after 34 moves of Game 2 of the Stockfish-Leela TCEC Cup 9 final match. Now, the full engine annotations for this game are actually downloadable from the TCEC archive. It contains all the engine evaluations and all the main lines of the engines throughout the game. What we're going to do though is we're going to take a good human look at this position and try and understand what's happening. Now the opening was a G3 King's Indian, and it was fairly biased towards the white side. Stockfish evaluated white's chances as plus 1.22 and Leela was 0.46. Now just note that the scale of Leela's evaluations is rather depressed in comparison to Stockfish, so those evaluations are roughly the same. It's a clear advantage for white, but still some way from winning. Now Stockfish had held the draw as black in the first game, and it was Leela's turn to try and hold. But at this point, this is move 34 has just been played, black's 34th move, king h8. Well, Leela's evaluation was still just 0.53, but Stockfish was already at a massive 3.24, and that rose to 3.55 after the next move. So it's a huge difference in insight between the two engines. And yeah, you know, for myself, I looked at the position and I understood that white is clearly better, but I wasn't yet thinking, you know, trivial win yet. So, well, let's try and understand, you know, why Stockfish thinks it's so good. Well, I mean, first of all, we have to start, I think, with the black D pawn, which is the most obvious weakness. It's cut off from the rest of black's position and easy to attack. I mean, the queen, the rook, and the knight can attack it, so this pawn is likely to fall in the long term. However, moving the pawn to d4 has had the effect of freeing d5 for the black knight, and that's a great spot to attack the pawn on f4, which is white's most obvious weakness. Just bear in mind, though, that a d5 outpost is not that stable for black, because if a queen and a rook were to attack a knight on d5, just imagine that the d4 pawn has disappeared, then knight takes e6 would knock away the support of the black knight. So it's not a really stable outpost, but it is a dangerous one. However, the big factor in white's favour in this position is the weakness of black's king and the strength of white's knight on g5. Now, that knight on g5 attacks h7, which is the only thing in front of the black king, which is pinned to the corner because of the open g-file. It also attacks the e6 pawn, and the point is, I mean, this is, you know, very hard to drive away this knight, because h6, as long as white can reply queen h5, then it's quite unlikely that black will be able to drive away the knight on g5, and h6 is also a weakening of black's king side. Yeah, but, you know, is this really worth 3.54? Well, the point is the tactics that originate from this knight on g5 and the weak black king on h8 are so powerful that it tips the evaluation towards that kind of level. I mean, tactically, black has a lot of problems, and I can just point one thing out. Just imagine that the king is on g7, and we've got a rook on c1. We'll have a tactic with rook takes c7, queen takes c7, and knight e6 check. And this theme, this idea, well, you'll see it coming back again and again and again within our variations. It's just a major theme, and it just seems impossible for black to deal with. Any moves that he has, for example, even rook takes f4, are always in contact with a knight coming to e6. So yeah, I mean, this is actually a very, very difficult position for black, but it's not something that you'd really spot just at a first glance. What did Stockfish do here? Well, Stockfish did something incredible here. Stockfish played rook d2. And, well, it caused some commotion in the TCEC chat, and somebody asked me, well, what's this for? And I wasn't really able to be very convincing. I mean, I sort of assumed that that Leela's evaluation was based on holding a very fraught line, and that this move actually just made that fraught line possible for white again, and Leela suddenly realised that it didn't have a move to really improve its position. And that's kind of true. I mean, that is kind of, it's not completely untrue, but the key thing is that black is paralysed, absolutely paralysed. Black has no good move in this position. What do we mean? Well, a little bit of analysis will show what we mean on there. Now, Leela played b5, which is actually a sort of a waiting move, basically trying to delay the bad times until a further moment. But what I wanted to do was to, I spent quite a lot of time just analysing it by myself before looking at it with an engine. I wanted just to try and find some human ideas, active ideas, and see what Stockfish had got planned against those. So h6 is the most obvious move for black. It's the move that I was always looking at first in every single position. Can I drive away this knight from g5? Well, we've got queen h5 in this position, queen g7, and now I didn't manage to find the right way. I had the right ideas, but I didn't get it all together. What I was looking at was this move rook c2, which is, well, we've mentioned the rook on the c file before. I'm teeing up ideas of rook takes c7. And they work against a number of things, but this move king g8 from black is a lovely defense. It unpins the king. It threatens to take on g5. It looks horrifically risky. I mean, after all, we're putting the king on a file that's open, where I could just put a rook on g2, but there's a few tricks, and it's all to do with having the rook on the second rank, because the obvious knight takes e6, knight e6, rook g2, pinning the queen and winning it, is met by the unpleasant, the annoying, the catastrophic actually, queen takes g2 and knight takes f4 check, picking up the queen. So rook c2 is not quite the way of doing it, but of course Stockfish here had come up with a much better idea. Rook to g2, threatening a discovered attack on the queen, and then the move that I thought held everything together. I thought this was fine for black when I was analysing by myself on a board, rook f5, pinning the knight to the queen. I couldn't find a good way of proceeding. But now Stockfish wants to play rook c2, and this is extremely unpleasant because, well, the rook is no longer covering the back rank, which means that anything like king to g8 is just met by rook c7, queen c7, queen to e8 check, and don't you dare play rook f8, because check takes, knight e6 check, wins the whole house, and we are just in time to stop the pawn from queening. So this lovely idea, rook g2, rook f5, rook c2, that was what I hadn't managed to understand for myself, and that's what Stockfish was aiming for, of course. So that is basically the refutation of h6. That's the reason why h6 is not a good move. Now, what else could we do? Well, after rook d2, Let's just go back to that position. I was also looking at knight a6. I mean, if h6 doesn't work, let's just try and get the knight active, right? I mean, comes round to c5, attacks b3, supports d4 to d3. Can't be too bad. But I actually found the correct way of playing, which I was very pleased about, actually. Queen h5, rook takes f4, and then this move queen h6, which is quite surprising. But what it threatens, it's X-ray attacking the rook. It's threatening knight takes h7. It's also stopping the rook from getting back to f8. And it's actually just very, very difficult for black to do anything at all here. Queen g7, of course, allows this fork again, always. I mean, this one is always coming back. And the really nice line is that if you go knight c5, I mean, I have various wins, but this is kind of the stunning one, isn't it? Queen takes d4 allows queen h7, and rook takes d4 allows queen f8, checkmate. So what else do we have? Well, I mean, the one thing that I was thinking about, the last real attempt that I was happy about, was this move rook f5. I thought, well, you know, we are keeping control of f4, attacking this knight on g5. You never know when a desperado might be useful. And also, if the queen comes to h5, then the knight's pinned to the queen. But here we see this this engine theme that I deal with in quite a lot of detail in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, my new book that's just been released. That's why I'm so excited. It's the ability to play on both sides, and all the play so far has come on the king side, but now white switches with queen b7, and this is absolutely massive. I mean, we're just going to play rook c2 and win the knight on c7, and there's a lovely little line: rook f4, rook c2, rook h4, king g3, rook h5 attacking the knight, rook takes c7, rook g5, king h4, and the king's safe from checks. And well, we've just got mate coming in somewhere. If we go queen d8, well, there's many ways of winning, but mate is as good as any, isn't it? Queen f7, checkmate. There's one more nice line to show you, which I think is definitely worth seeing, and that's after rook d2, rook g8. That was my final attempt, just relinquishing the attack on f4. It's true. But maybe looking to get some sort of attack on the g file. And you know, if you go after the d pawn greedily with queen e4, we play h6, rook d4, queen e7, and this is suddenly quite awkward for white, because after knight f3, queen g7, how are you going to stop mate on g3 or g2? I mean, you can't. It's really dangerous. So what we can do, however, after rook g8, is to play this move queen h5, which is very strong. I mean, we're threatening, or are we? Rook takes d4, distracting the queen from the defense of h7. Now, what I thought I had, I wasn't really sure what I was doing at this stage. Was I thought I maybe had knight e8 with black. The idea being that something like rook d4, I've got the desperado rook takes g5. And if you take it, I'll take with the queen. Well, I'll get some counterplay, maybe. Who knows? Maybe not that much. But there's an even better move here, and that's simply this move, queen d1, which protects the rook on d4, and the rook on g5 will be captured next move. So, you know, absolutely beautiful, really. So going back to what Leela did, after rook d2, Leela basically wanted to try and stay still and played b5, a5 and a6. Just waiting moves, basically, saying, okay, white, what are you going to do? There might be lots of, a few different winning moves, I could imagine. But I think none is as elegant or as beautiful as Stockfish's idea, rook to d1. I mean, 35 rook d2, 37 rook d1, another waiting move, and the tactics are slightly different with the rook on d1, but they still all work. In particular, I mean, let's focus on h6. We go queen h5, queen g7, and rook c1. The big point is king g8. You might think, well, this worked against when the rook was on c2. It doesn't work anymore though, because I go knight e6 here and rook g1. and this time you're pinned on g1 and queen g1, king g1 does not bring the white queen the right king rather within range of a knight fork on f4. So white just wins there. So after rook to d1, Leela just gave up the pawn with queen e7, and then rook takes d4, knight d5, king g2, b4, takes, rook takes d5. White was 2 pawns up. I mean, there's some checks and everything. I think, in the human game, if you were in a quick play finish here, it's possible to mess something like this up. But I think, even with 1 second left, Stockfish would make it. So, and that wasn't actually too difficult. So, I mean, this was a stunning period of play, I think. It's just to understand. I mean, I talked about the attacking rhythm theme, and what you notice, I mean, what's perhaps the very most impressive thing about Stockfish's play is how well it calculates, understands how much time it actually has how much time it has on the ball, you could say, in football parlance, to actually prosecute its attack. And here it's not trying to finish anything off straight away. It's just taking its time and letting the black position fall over. And just to verify that, I just had a look at a couple of the 2 human moves that really occurred to me in this position. And that's queen e4 and queen h5. I was just intrigued to know, was it the rook d2 was optimal but everything else was winning, or were there any chances for black to defend if white didn't play the best moves? Well, the latter more or less seems to be the case. I mean, if I go queen e4, that's interesting. It's attacking the pawn h7, trying to get the pawn on d4, but we've got this move h6 here. Rook takes d4, we go queen g7 here, and you've got to be a little bit careful here because knight f3, rook g8. We've seen this before. This is really strong for black. So we go back to h3, which is not ideal. Rook to g8, threatening some checks. And I hadn't seen this at all. I was looking at queen f3, knight d5, which looked pretty decent to me. If f5, there's queen takes e5 check. But my engine, of course, came up with rook d3, knight d5, and then there's some possibility of playing f5. The rook's defending g3, and the queen's defending e5. But then there's an absolutely stunning move here, which is knight f4. Ooh! Queen takes f4. Ooh, and variation allows queen g2 mate, and knight takes f4 just allows a perpetual, like this. Beautiful. So queen e4, that I understand, not the best move, but what I thought maybe could be possible was after king h8 that we play queen h5, always dangerous. Remember this idea before? Rook takes f4 and then queen h6. The one difference here though is that the knight on c7 is defending e6, so we can play this move queen g7. Haha! But I have queen takes g7, king g7 and then rook c1, which is a very cruel move. The knight can't be defended. Rook f7 is met by knight f7, and of course if the knight moves away I've got this knight fork takes e6. However, I was very, very happy to find a very good move here. Found it very quickly, actually. Rook takes h4 check is obvious, but king g3, rook h5, rook takes check, king g6, and knight f3. Defends e5, attacks d4, keeps everything under control, white's just winning. But after rook c1, I've got this lovely move, king g6. The difference being that if I go king g3 to attack the rook, I've got knight d5. Yay! The knight gets out of trouble, defends the rook on f4, and there's no fork on e6 anymore. Or after rook c7, I go rook h4 check. King g3 allows king g5, because here I just hang on to the rook's coattails, and black's actually winning in this position, of course, just more material. And after rook h4, you're forced to play knight h3. And then either rook e4, which was the move I wanted to play, or Stockfish's king f5 are, and variation, are pretty decent for black. I mean, the again, something I talk about in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, it's this way of defending for engines. You see it very, very often, that they go for a pawns against knight scenario, often with either a rook on the board or a queen on the board. And yeah, I mean, if you've got multiple pawns on both sides of the board, pass pawns, the knight finds it very hard to cope. It's it's not not a whole piece advantage in those positions. And well, I mean, the engines really find a lot of draws in that way, and that's really one of the big defensive techniques that I've taken away from the engine games that I've analysed. And yeah, lots more examples, very interesting examples in my new book. So there we are. That was that great middle game from Stockfish. I thought the beautiful idea, in this position, first of all, the assessment so high, and then the realization is just a waiting move, and you just let the black position just topple over. And it was only after this move that Leela's evaluation got up to a level similar to Stockfish's. Until that point, Leela just hadn't realised how bad the position was, and I have to say, certainly I hadn't either. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, stay tuned to the channel for many more videos about engine chess. Just building on everything that I wrote in my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. And also keep an eye on my website, matthewsadler.me.uk. If you want to see a written version of this video, then you can find it there too. And well, if you like this video, then please give me a like. And if you want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe. Okay, thanks very much for watching.